writing a research paper. My first advice and my first tip here, before you start writing, you should read first. Without reading relevant work in your research area, you will not be able to write. Without reading, you will find it difficult to identify what the research gap is. Without reading, you will find it difficult to understand which research method fit well with your research problem or research question. Without reading, you will not be able to find out how to measure different variables or which database I can use to collect the variables. Also, without reading, you will not be able to understand which method is suitable for analyzing the data and how can you discuss this data. So reading itself, reading is the first step in writing. Reading now will make you a leader in the future, leader in writing research papers. So reading is the first step. But you might ask, reading what? Reading textbooks, reading research articles. I highly recommend reading research articles in top-ranked journals. But at the same time, if you're still a master's student or a PhD student and you have no clue idea about the topic of your interest, let's say that you are thinking about making your research dissertation on Islamic finance, but you don't have the basics on Islamic finance. In this case, it might be better for you to read textbook first to understand the concepts, and then you move forward by reading research articles in top-ranked journals in this topic. So reading is the first step. The second step, you need to think carefully about your reader. Who will read your work? If you are a master student or a PhD student, you need to think about your supervisor. So you need to find out other PhD theses or master dissertations, how they look like, what the main contents of these dissertations or theses. And this will give you like a clear guidance. It's not a strong one, but it will give you like a broad guidance about what the structure of the thesis or the master dissertation. Also, if you are thinking about writing a research paper, again, who is the reader of the research paper? The international readers. So you need to find out how to write the paper to satisfy the reader's need. So at least it should be clear, it should contain a contribution, it should contain a topic of interest for the readers as well as the editor and reviewers of the journal. Number three, you need to find out the format, which format I should follow. So if you are studying master or PhD, you need to find out the format recommended by your university, and you need to follow this format. If you are planning to publish a research paper, you need to check the scope of the journal, and also you need to find out the instructions to the authors how to write the paper, which format you should use. So for each journal, you will find some instructions. You need to follow these instructions before submitting your paper to the journal. The last point here mentions that you need also to be ensure that each chapter in your thesis or dissertation or each section in your paper include relevant materials, and you will not be able to identify the content of each chapter or each section without reading. So reading first will help you to find out what the main contents of each chapter or each section in your paper. For example, if I asked you now about the contribution for the research paper or a master or PhD dissertation, should we write the contribution at the introduction or at the conclusion? Some might say introduction, others will say conclusion. So we don't know. So we need to find out, if I'm planning to submit my paper to a research journal, I need to find out where the authors discuss the contribution of their work at the beginning in the introduction or at the end in the conclusion. Exactly the same for the PhD thesis or master dissertation. We need to find out what's the best place we can discuss our contribution. This will be based on the prescribed format by the university or the format of the journal. So reading is very important before start thinking about writing. So reading helps and writing requires plan. So you can't write without having a clear plan about what should be written. So my advice here that you need to start early thinking about writing relevant sections or chapters of your work. But before start writing and invest a huge amount and effort in writings, you need to be sure that you have the data and other resources for your empirical chapters. So this advice means that because I found some students start their first and second year of their PhD just writing the introduction, the literature, the methodology, and after 2 years, they discover that they don't have access to data, and also they are unable to analyze this data. Then they stopped and they start thinking about another topic to choose, or they change their topic. So you can start writing drafts, incomplete drafts, but please at the start of your research journey, be sure that you have access to all data and resources for the empirical section of your research. The second point, to have a good plan for writing, you need to find out how many chapters you should write. In your research paper, how many sections? And most importantly, you need to identify and find out by your own reading what the content of each chapter and what the content of each section. So for the methodology section, what should I include and exclude from the methodology? These points will be learned by reading a lot of articles published in top-ranked journals. You will get the sense about what are the key items or the key information that should be included in each chapter or each section. The first point here, the normal question we ask, which chapter or which section I should start with first? One of the major mistakes I found for some students, they start by chapter 1 because it's like the order, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, and so on. No, chapter 1, we should leave chapter 1 until the end of the journey. Once we complete chapter 2 until the end of the thesis, the discussion chapter, then we can think about writing chapter 1 and the last chapter, the conclusion. So don't write chapter 1 first. Normally you'll start by the literature, so literature review chapter, then you will move to the methodology chapter, then the finding chapters, and the discussion. Sometimes we might merge discussion with the findings and the conclusion. Once you finish everything, you can think about writing the first chapter, which is the introduction. This plan will help you to manage your time. So you have to manage your time, and managing time is very important in writing your PhD thesis or master dissertation or in writing your research paper. So if you manage your time and if you identify which chapter you should start with first, you can easily identify some goals. So if you are a research student and your PhD for 3 years, you need to find out what is required in the first year, what's required in the second year, and what is required in the third year. And for each year, you can start writing what is required for this specific year. Also, you need to have some to classify the tasks on a daily basis or on a monthly basis or weekly basis. Some tasks might be very important. I think at the start of your journey, when you read articles, the urgent and most important task is not finding the methodology. I think the most important and urgent task will be identifying the research gap. You need to identify the research gap. You need to think about this gap and how can you fill this gap. So research gap is important. After that, you can think about how can you fill this gap, which research method or methodology will help you to fill this gap. So you need to find out which part of your writing is important for the time being, which is urgent and which is less urgent and not too much important at the current time. It might be better to start with plan, let's say monthly plan for over 12 months, weekly plan and daily plans. Eliminate any distractions, and these kind of distractions affect you because when writing, you need to concentrate on what you read and write to make link between what you read and your research objectives and what you write is satisfy or meet the research objectives. So any kind of distractions might affect your way of writing. Watch your progress. Watch your progress. If you have a daily plan, writing a daily plan, and each day you achieve a part of this plan will give you the self-motivation to move forward to the next step in the plan. And at the same time, of course, you need to take care of yourself. So where to start? Point number one, you need to read relevant articles from top-ranked journals. So in your subject area, you need to find out top-ranked journals. Top-ranked journals doesn't mean that any articles published in English. You should find out the ranks we used to judge on the quality of the journal articles. For example, we have ABS ranking, we have ABDC, we have Scopus, we have different ranks. So you need to find out which rank is used in your country, which rank is acceptable at your university, and from this rank, you need to identify relevant articles to your research area. Then you need to read the articles. So when you read the articles, you need to underline the key points and directly link these key points with your research work. So when reading, keep in mind that you have specific research questions, you have a specific research aim and objectives, and try to make a link between what you are reading and the research aim and objectives. After that, you can start organizing the points to satisfy the contents of each chapter or each sections. And you need a logical order for these points. And finally, you need, as a researcher, to add your comments. So you might agree or disagree with what has been done in the literature before. When start writing, you need to be very clear in writing. So any unnecessary details should be deleted. Be simple, use a simple language to make your story clear to the reader. Be specific when the word specific here means that try to avoid any assumptions. Don't assume people know everything about your topic. So when you talk about something, be specific so they understand what you are saying. Be logical when you structure your work. For example, you can't start by discussing your methodology and then the literature review. There is a logical order, and your order for writing for your paper or your chapter should have a logical order. So be objective. So don't be subjective to specific results. If your results show insignificant relationship between y and x, nothing wrong. You can say there is no relationship between y and x. If you provide any narrative with a specific result, you have to support this result by tables, by numbers. So don't present any unsupported results. Also be accurate. For example, some authors say a long period of time this happened. So if you say a long period of time, be accurate and say when this happened. Some people say that most of the participants agree on this topic. Again, the word most of participants is too generic. You need to be more accurate and say the percentage of participants who agree on this specific topic. Be direct, so don't leave the reader to work out what you are saying. So when you provide a sentence, be sure that the sentence is clear and its readability is high, which means that your reader will understand what you mean. Be critical, criticize other works, and also criticize your own work, because you should, at the end of your work, mention to the limitation of the work. So this is general advice. If we move forward to the research proposal, this is a starting point doing research. If you are a master's student, PhD student, and if you are even a member of staff, plan to apply for grant, you need to write a short research proposal. So the research proposal provide a coherent plan of the research. In the research proposal, you try to show the reader that you have a good knowledge in the area. You successfully identify some gaps in the area, and you plan to fill some of these gaps. In the research proposal, you also discuss the research problem, research objectives. You should discuss the research method which will help you to achieve the research objective. For the research proposal, there is some university identify some word limits. So you should check the word limit and any guidelines for the research proposal. The research proposal requires an idea to start with, and this idea should be of interest to you as a researcher, because if you choose an idea and this idea is interesting to you, this will give you the motivation to work hard on this idea. But at the same time, you need to think about your reader. Your supervisor should be interested in the idea as well, and the readers of the international journal should be interested. The idea itself should be new. So try to avoid duplication of other work. Try to avoid a paper has been done in America and I will have the same idea and doing the same idea in another country. Replication only doesn't add too much value. But if you have a clear justification why we should duplicate the same idea in another context and what the uniqueness of this context, this will help to for the reader to understand the incremental contribution you are offering to the literature. Also, you need to find an idea which is relevant and important to a group of stakeholders. So think about who might be interested in your results, who cares about your results. And finally, the idea should be a practical idea, which means that you should have enough resources to work on this idea for your master or PhD or your paper. Resources here means that you have enough data for completing the research idea and for achieving the research objectives and for answering the research questions. So normally we judge on the quality of the research paper or the master dissertation or PhD based on some criteria. Generally, we check if the aim and objective are clear. Does this research objective have an unexpected impact on the society? Try to find out what's the research motivation of this paper. What are the potential contributions? To what extent the author provide some valid research hypothesis or research questions? And also, if the authors used a sound research methodology, and to what extent the writing style is clear and easy for the reader to understand the story of the paper. So these are the main points of interest to judge on the quality of a research paper or a PhD thesis. So now you might ask, where can we find a new idea? Finding a new idea is not a big problem, but to find a new idea, I strongly disagree with anybody saying that just go and ask experts. You need to read. Reading will help you. So rather than going to your supervisor or potential supervisor, asking him to suggest one or two ideas, you can read. And from reading, you can get hundreds of new research ideas. You can impress your supervisor by these ideas, and you can discuss with him how to choose among these ideas. So when I mention to the word read here, I will be more specific by saying that you need to focus your time and efforts in reading top-ranked journals in your field. If you don't know what are they, please ask experts in your field about the top-ranked journals in your field. Also, during my research journey, I found the review articles are very helpful. In accounting field, we have Journal of Accounting Literature. I found this journal provides a huge list of topics, and they review the literature, identify research gaps, and suggest unlimited ideas for future research. So this will be a good start. If I'm a master or PhD student, I will try to find out review article, to find out an idea. And from this idea, you will know from reading the article what has been done, and also you will find out some ideas for future research. I don't recommend all working papers for reading, but if you look at SSRN, there is some, not all, there is some quality papers on SSRN. If you search, just look at the recent articles published in 2020 or 2019, you will get an idea about the new topics in the area. Number 4, you need to keep an eye on top quality conferences in your field for accounting, for example, AAA, BAFA, EEA, and others, because in these top quality conferences, you will find top quality researcher and top quality research ideas there. So you can follow up these conferences. You can also follow up the researchers to get a clue about what the new research ideas. Number 5, a valid source and very good source of new ideas is the professional bodies publication, like ACCA. Professional bodies publications give us information about practical problem, and we can look at this practical problem and we can start searching these problems and provide a solution for these problems. Also, I found very useful to look at the special issues in top-ranked journals, because in special issues, they provide some ideas about research of interest. If it's current special issues, fine. Also for forthcoming special issue, in forthcoming special issue, you will find an editor or guest editor is interested in a specific topic, and he raised a number of questions he is interested in. This gives you a clue about what is new you can look at when you think about research. And finally, it is wise to read the recent PhD thesis, especially if it's supervised by your first supervisor. So what you need to do, you will not read all of this at the start. You need to scan all of this to identify what is relevant to you, and then whatever relevant, you will read in depth. You will read in depth to identify the research limitation, what has not been done in the area, and the ideas for future research recommended by the authors. You need also to add your comments to these ideas, and you need to discuss these ideas with your supervisor or potential supervisor or your co-author. And before going forward, moving ahead, you need to check the availability of the data and other requirements for the analysis. In terms of the main components of a research paper or a thesis, we start by title. We have abstract, introduction, which includes the research aim, objectives, research questions, research motivations, research importance, potential contributions, key findings, and the structure of the paper or the structure of the thesis. Then we have another chapter about the literature review, and the main purpose of the literature review is not to summarize what has been done in the area. Summarizing doesn't help. What we need to do for the literature review is to critically review the article, to identify the research gaps, and to explain how our research will fill at least one or two or three of these gaps. Once you identify the literature review, identify the research gaps, and you need to identify which of these gaps will be considered in your work, you can start thinking about the theory, which theory will be used, which conceptual framework will be used, and then you can develop your research hypotheses or your research questions. Then you need to have like chapter or research methodology or section in your paper discussing the context of your study, sample selection criteria, the sample period, how did you select this period and why? If you say that my sample period starts in 2000 and ended 2015, you need to explain why 2000 is the start and why 2015 is the end. Research hypothesis can be in the research methodology section, or it might be better to be in the literature review and theory section. You need to justify why you choose a specific research method. You need to explain how will you collect your data. You need also to define your variables of interest and to explain how will you measure these variables. If you use any database, you need to explain and mention to the source of the data collected. After that, you have a chapter or section about the empirical analysis. You might start by some descriptive analysis to describe your sample, some correlation analysis, and then the regression analysis, which give you the main research findings. By the research findings, you accept or reject your research hypothesis and you answer your research question. You might have a separate chapter on discussion, or you might link this chapter, the discussion, with the empirical analysis to explain to what extent your findings are in line with theory and literature, or you have different results. So are your results are similar or different from what has been reported before? And finally, you need to find the conclusion. And for the conclusion, you have the key results, answering to the main research questions, discussing the implications of the findings, research limitations, and future research. And then you have the references and any tables or appendices. If we start by just giving some comments on each of these sections, the research title of the proposal, of the thesis, or research paper is very important because it is the first thing the reader look at. So research title capture the attention of the reader. So the research title should reflect the main contribution of your paper. But don't think about your research title too much. Once you complete your research proposal, you can identify the title which reflects the contribution. Once you finish your research paper, you can think about the best title which reflects the main contribution of the paper. I know in some country like Egypt, you register the title first and you can't change the title. It's a problem, but I don't know how can we solve it. But at least when you choose the title at the first, be sure that you understand every single step in your research proposal. So you will not change the research method, you will not change the scope of your research paper, you will not change the sample, you will not change the research questions. In this case, the title can be as it is. In some journals, they recommend that the title should be between 8 and 15 words. So shorter is better, but it shouldn't be too short. In your title, try to avoid any abbreviations and try to use words which give a positive impression to the reader. Try to avoid any unnecessary words like a study of or an analysis of, because if you drop these words, it will not affect the quality of your title. The title can be a question, a phrase. The title shouldn't include any grammatical mistake. So any grammar mistake in the title give a very bad impression to the reader when they read your work. I found some articles published in high-ranked journals with title I consider this title as not good title. I will not say bad title because it's published already. So we have tone management in accounting review, corporate ownership around the world, journal of finance, Islamic banking, Asian Pacific economic literature. So from this title, I don't think it's a good title because it is too short. If you look at tone management, when I saw this title, I don't know what they mean by tone management. So you have to read the abstract. And sometimes you have to read the introduction to understand what do they mean by the tone management. So two short titles might not help the reader to understand or to attract the reader attention. Other title might give some details like this title, capital structure around the world, the roles of firm and country-specific determinants. And the second title, aggregated, voluntary, and mandatory risk disclosure incentives, evidence from UK FTSE all-share companies. The third one, what drives mandatory and voluntary risk disclosure variation across German, UK, and US. So as you can see, the title is detailed. It gives us impression about the main contribution of the paper. The title can be a sentence, or if you look at the last one, the title can be a question. And it makes like more interesting for the reader to see a question in the title. Then the abstract should cover mainly the main objective of the paper, which method you have used, and what are the main findings and contribution is. And each journal have like some criteria for writing the abstract. So this classification based on emerald journals, but again, if you plan to publish in any journal, you need to find out what are the word limit of the abstract. But generally, any abstract covers objective methodology findings and the originality of the work. If you move to the introduction, you will find that the introduction covers a lot of information. So it covers the research background. The introduction should give the reader the impression that you understand the topic, the the history of the topic, the background of the topic. The introduction should include the research problem you try to solve. The introduction should include research aim and objectives, research motivations, research importance, contributions, summary of the key findings, and the structure of the paper or the dissertation. So these points are important. These are 8 points. You can merge these points together. For example, when you discuss the objective, you can merge the objective with the importance of your work. When you discuss the key findings, you can merge the key findings with the contribution of your research. But these are the main key points that should be included in the introduction. So the introduction, try to answer some questions like what's the nature of the problem, why it is a problem, what's the significance of the problem, to whom this problem is significant, why this topic is interested at this time, and also why it is of interest to look at this specific context. So if your study is about corporate governance in Egypt, you need to explain why Egypt, why the Egyptian context is interesting and unique. And of course, in the introduction, to give the reader a good impression about your work, you need to write the contribution of your work in the introduction. You might repeat it again in the conclusion, but I'm against the idea of repeating words. So it's better just to write the contribution in the introduction, and in the conclusion, you can just show the reader how did you answer the research questions. So for the research background, it describes the nature and the history of the topic, the root of the research problem, and it shows the reader that you understand what has been done in the area. So for example, one of my paper was about risk disclosure in state-owned enterprises in Italy. So in the background, we're starting by giving some definition about risk disclosure, because risk disclosure in state-owned enterprises was something new at that time. So we start to explain to the reader what do we mean by risk disclosure, because this paper is published in one of the public sector accounting, and in public sector accounting, they don't have like a clear clue about risk types in state-owned enterprises at that time. So the reviewers asked us to add a definition of the concept of risk disclosure. Then we'll explain why firms should disclose risk, what relation for disclosure in state-owned enterprise, and what the characteristics of the corporate governance system in state-owned enterprises, because our paper was about the role of the board of directors in risk disclosure. Then you need to identify the research aim and objective, and the difference between the research aim and objective. Aim is a goal that your research paper tries to achieve. The objective is considered as the practical steps to achieve this aim. So normally we identify the research aim and objective in the paper. These some examples you will find in the paper. They mentioned the purpose of this paper is, the aim of the present paper is, or in this paper we aim to answer the important questions, and so on. Then you need to identify the research problem, what the problem is. So the research problem, you can get information about the research problem from the literature itself. So you might find like mixed results in the literature, or you might find some problems in practice by the professional bodies publication, and this will help you to identify the research problem, and the research problem should be clearly stated in your research. So you will find here the research problem. I try to give you some examples. The literature consider this area before, but they don't take into account an important variable that affect the relationship between the other variables. So you will find always that the research problem should be mentioned. So you show the reader that you have a problem and you try to solve this problem. The importance, why this research is important. And if you believe the research is important, you should identify who might be interested in this research. If you look at this slide in the red line, the reason behind the increased attention is that this research has potential policy implications. It helps to inform regulators and managers about the benefit of disclosure. So here we said that our research is important because it helps regulators and managers to know something new, something they are interested to know about disclosure. So research important should be clearly mentioned in your paper. Research motivation. Why? Ask yourself, like a child, why you look at this area? Why you are interested to examine the relationship between these two variables? Why you focus on this context? What's the uniqueness of this context? All these whys represent the research motivations. So I'm going back to my article when I looked at the board role in risk disclosure in state-owned enterprises. The first why I got is why Italy. So why Italy is interesting concept or context for your study. The second why is why state-owned enterprises is important. So why governance and how governance in state-owned enterprises different from governance from other firms. So all this why, answering all these whys helps us to write a strong research motivation. So you will find in the research, we will say that I choose this country because this country provides a unique context and the authors explain the uniqueness of this country. So this is the research motivation answering the why questions. This paper, for example, focus on 3 countries, Germany, UK, and US. And the author here in red mentions that these 3 countries provide a unique context when we study risk disclosure. And they started explaining why they choose these 3 countries. In the last paper, the paper focused on one industry sector rather than all non-financial or non-financial. They looked at the oil and the gas industry sector. And they have mentioned that the oil and the gas sector is worthy of investigation because of this sector also is unique by complex and so and so and so. So we'll find here that if you choose a country or a company or a group of companies, you should justify why. If you examine a specific topic or if you have a specific research question, you should explain why you choose this research question. So all these whys will help you write a strong research motivation. After that, you need to explain your research contribution. What is new you add? So the contribution might be contribution to knowledge. The contribution might be contribution to knowledge by being the first empirical evidence in specific context. It might be a contribution to theory by introducing a new theory to the field. It might be a contribution to methodology if you provide a new measure for a specific research variable. Or it might be a contribution to practice by providing a practical solution to the problem in practice. These are some examples you will find in all research paper. The word contribute, contributes, contributions exist. So our paper provides 3 contributions. This paper makes a major contribution. Our paper makes several contributions. The last paragraph the paper makes several contributions. We contribute. Our paper is the first that doing so and so and so. Also, this one of the paper which try to sell or market their product, they mention that the paper makes an important and novel contribution. It is the only paper to examine what the role of narrative disclosure. It is the first paper to show that, or to provide evidence that, so this is the way to present your contribution. After that, you summarize your key findings, and you end the introduction by a paragraph on the structure of the paper. Literature review is very important for any research paper or for any master or PhD thesis. And what the reader expects from you, the reader expects that you will reference key articles in the area. And the word key articles here means articles published in top ranked journals in your area. So try not to miss any of these key articles. The literature should be critical, and critical here means identify the strengths and weaknesses of the papers. Why we identify the strengths and weaknesses? Because at the end, we need to show the reader that the topic itself is worth researching, and we understand the key issues around the topic, and we identify the gap, and we will fill some of these gaps in our research. Some people refer to the literature as any available documents, published, unpublished, used in your work, in your thesis. But my advice here is you need to focus on top-ranked journals, and of course you need to be honest to consider non-ranked if you use any of these non-ranked references. But make your story, your methodology, your key issues in your dissertation or thesis or paper based on the key articles. So critical review, as I mentioned, helps us to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the article. It provides critical analysis, and this will help the reader to assess the value of your work. So critical literature review is not a summary of everything written in the area. And some authors provide like checklist of having a critical literature review. This is a checklist. So be sure that you covered all related literature, most relevant and significant series. You covered the most relevant and significant literature. You include up-to-date literature, the new literature in the area. Now we are in 2020. So if you have a paper, be sure that you update the literature up to 2020. And also they have here mentioned to some criteria for evaluating the literature. More importantly, have you assessed the strengths and weaknesses of the research paper? Have you been objective in discussing the result? Have you included the references? Did you differentiate between facts and opinion? Have you justified clearly your own opinion and other criteria? So there is some criteria for the literature. So you need to be critical, but most importantly, for the critical literature review, you need to identify the weaknesses of the literature, gaps in the literature, and you need to explain how will you fill these gaps. The gaps in the literature, there is a huge list of different types of gaps. Because of time, I will not discuss all these gaps, but just this is the reference. I got this information. The gap might be evidence gap. Evidence gap means that the evidence in the literature is mixed, contradicts. Or knowledge gap, which means that knowledge might not exist in the field, or the result of the study different from what we expected. The gap might be practical knowledge gap, which means that the actual behavior is in practice is different from the expected behavior. The gap might be in the methodology itself. There is something wrong in the methodology which would address. The gap might be empirical gap. There is no empirical research in this area. The gap might be in the theory itself. Different theory have different stories, or the gap might be in the population or the sample of the research itself. So we need to identify the gap, then explain how to fill this gap. After that, after identifying the research gaps, you need to say, what will you do? So if your research is qualitative, you need to identify what the research questions you plan to answer. And for these research questions, you need to build these research questions based on the gaps identified in the literature. So one of the normal questions we ask a student when we examine them, based on what you select these research questions. So you should survey the literature, identify the gaps, and based on these gaps, you will fill some of these gaps by answering specific research questions. If your research is quantitative, you need to build or develop some research hypothesis, and the research hypothesis should be based on theories and sometimes based on relevant empirical results. For the research methodology section or chapter, the most important part here is the justification of why this method. So if you use qualitative or quantitative, you should justify why qualitative or why quantitative. Your sample selection criteria should be justified as well, why you choose 100 observation or 300 based on what. The sample period should be justified as well. If you have a specific model, if you use OLS or random effect, fixed effect, or what GMM, you need to just why you use a specific model. Also, you need to define your variable definitions and how you measure these variables. You need to explain in details the data collection so you can allow people after you, researcher after you, if they follow the same steps, they will get the same data. And you need to be transparent and explain the source of this data. For the quantitative research, you start discussing sample selection, variable, as I mentioned. If you have a new variable, you need to explain how you develop the new variables. Some studies provide pilot study, especially if they have a new variable for disclosure. They try to test the validity of their disclosure. Discuss in details the techniques used, OLS or fixed effect, random effect, variable selection criteria, any correlation analysis, descriptive analysis, the regression. So all these details should be in the paper. Otherwise, we will not trust the findings you are reporting in the paper. For the qualitative, again, if you use case study, one case study or more than one case study, you need to justify why you choose case study, and you need to justify the number of case study you have considered. How many people you contacted? How long? Was it face-to-face meeting, Skype interviews? So you need to explain more about how you're doing the research, the qualitative research. The response rate, so how many questionnaires you sent, how many responses you received, is it enough? What efforts you have done to increase the response rate? How can you compare this response rate with others in the literature? So also you need to provide some validity and reliability test for the qualitative research. For findings, I will talk very simple. If you are quantitative research, you need to link your findings with the research hypothesis. And you need to explain if you accept or reject the research hypothesis. Also, you need to provide evidence from table provided. You need to be sure that what is written in the finding section match the information provided in the tables. For the qualitative research, you need to identify the main research themes and link these themes with the respondents' characteristics. Try to link the findings with the research questions and provide evidence from quotation received when you do the interview to support your arguments. To discuss your findings, you need to summarize the key findings, and you need to discuss to what extent these findings are in line with the literature and theories. You need to tell a story to the reader. You need to discuss both significant and insignificant result. Don't say the result is not significant or significant full stop. You need to discuss, which means that you need to explain, so what, if your result is significant or insignificant, how this result help the reader to react in practice. Finally, the paper or the thesis ends by a conclusion, and again, the conclusion is not a summary of what you have done. The conclusion should provide answers to the main research questions asked. The conclusion should discuss so what questions, what the implications of the findings for the stakeholders. The conclusion also should discuss the research limitation, what has not been done in your research, and the conclusion should provide some ideas for future research for researchers. So good conclusion never include any new information. Good conclusion refer the reader back to the main focus of the paper. Bad conclusion is just a summary, and it is focusing on minor issues, and you'll find for the bad conclusion, they sometimes have new material which has not been discussed before. After that, you have the list of references. Of course, reference should be organized alphabetical order. You need to be sure that you cite articles from top-ranked journals. You need to be consistent in writing the reference. You need to cite only relevant articles, and you need to be sure that all articles cited have been appeared or have been listed in the list of references at the end of the paper. If your English is poor, try to attend any academic writing course. This workshop is not academic writing. This workshop just gives like some tips for the academic writing. But if you search YouTube by searching for the word academic writing, you will find many courses which help you to improve your academic writing. Also, if you look at academic phrase bank book, this book help you to write each section in your paper on your thesis perfectly. It gives you different ways of writing the same thing. So if we say, for example, I need to write something about my contribution, should I say the contribution is, or the paper provide a good contribution which is, or the paper provide novel contribution? What's the best way to present my contribution? Academic phrase bank provide you different ways of presenting different issues for the whole PhD or master or research paper. So if you need to present your objectives, methodology, data, source of data, limitation, if you need to criticize other work, you will find different way. So you can use some of their style, or reading this book itself will help you to improve your English language and to write a good paper in English. Also, we have editing surface and proofreading. I'm against the editing surface. Editing means that you will give the paper to someone who will rewrite the paper. And it's very dangerous because I don't think all proofreaders who make the editing surface understand the context you are searching. So it's better just to send to proofreading to be sure that there is no grammatical issues. Also, I found this channel, Learn English with Emma, provide a very fantastic workshops free, which explain to you how to write in English. It helps to improve the quality of writing by its very short videos, about 15 minutes, and it covers many things. I'm sure that If you follow this channel, if you listen to these videos, you will find easy to write a research article in English. My final advice, don't try to copy someone else's work or ideas as your own. This is very dangerous and this will affect your future career. So plagiarism is not acceptable at all and there is no excuse. And I put here like source of the link which explain what this means. I think we covered now all the points. Thank you very much for inviting me, Dr. Ahmed. I will leave now the PowerPoint, and if you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you so much, Professor Khaled, for useful presentation. I know it's tight time to present all of these information in just 45 minutes. Please, guys, if you want to ask any question, just press the hand rise, and Professor Khaled will answer your question. Thank you. Fatima, you can ask your question, please. Fatima. Mustafa.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
My first question is about writing theses, about writing any scientific material for many pages. My difficulty always is how to use my taking notes from the reading and manage the huge information from my reading and writing any articles or thesis for or dissertation for PhD. Because when we read a lot of articles from Scopus, Clarivate, so many details, some of the information useful for introduction, some of them is useful for discussion part, some of them is important for methodology. But my difficulty always is how to manage my think notice in, for example, in a Microsoft Word, and manage that in my writing process. Even if I use it in a traditional way, practical way, take notes in any papers and try to write that in the laptop, will be very difficult to manage that. So there is any software, there is any practical way to help us to manage our notes in the writing process? This is my question.
Okay, thank you, Mustafa. Yes, in Vivo software can help you to manage these issues. So for NVivo, you can import all the research articles you have, and you can have a coding which help you to gather all the information about any specific section you need. For example, if you need to collect information about data used in each single paper, you can simply inform or ask NVivo to find out paragraphs related to data collection. So they group every paragraph from the literature or the articles you have in just one folder. One file contains all sentences related to data. If you are searching about a section about research hypothesis, it do the same. But personally, what I do it manually. When I started my PhD, I have like different files. This file is just empty file, literature, another file for the methodology, another file for the literature, another 5 for the discussion. So whatever I read during my PhD journey, I found relevant. I say, okay, this part could be relevant and useful for the discussion. So I copy and paste it in the discussion section. I put the reference, and this helped me. When I start writing a chapter, I found many useful notes from my own previous reading, and this helped me to write the complete thesis. But in vivo helps in doing this task as well. Thank you.
So my question is in vivo called the software?
Yes, in vivo software, yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
So all what you need is to include all your research articles in the software and try to do some search, and this group all the information need in one file.
Okay, can I ask another question, please?
Yes.
Yeah, could you send us the slides of this tutorial, please?
Can you repeat again?
Could you send us the slides of PowerPoint for this tutorial?
Yes, of course. Yes. Send me email. I will send the slide to you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mustafa. Fatma Abu Mishdad. You can ask your question.
Can you hear me, please?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Yes.
I want to ask about, he mentioned about the editing and the proofreading. He said it's not dangerous, but what did he mean about editing? And if I want to improve myself about the proofreading, do you have any tips or something like that?
Okay, I will explain this point. Once you finish your paper, you send your paper to someone to check the English.
Yeah.
It's native speaker, and the native speaker give you two options. He asked you, should I proofread or edit your paper? Proofread means that he checks the English grammar only. Proofread editing means that he will read the sentence, understand the sentence, and he will rewrite the sentence based on his understanding. And this is very dangerous because his understanding might not match your understanding. Also, he might not be specialized in your area, and he might destroy the whole idea you try to present in your paper.
So what do you recommend?
Just proofreading. Ask a native speaker to proofread your work to correct just the grammar mistakes.
Okay, how can I improve myself about the proofreading? For example,
in my slide, I mentioned to Emma channel, she gave examples how to improve your academic writing, and also you need to attend some academic writing seminars. So if you search YouTube academic writing, you will find many tips for the academic writing.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Dalal Thani.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. First, thank you so much, Dr. Ahmad and Dr. Khaled, for giving us this opportunity. And then I have two short questions. The first one, should I always have a hypothesis in my research? And then the second question, what is the best way to conduct theme for qualitative research?
Okay, the first question, you should have a research hypothesis if you have if your research is quantitative. So for quantitative research, we expect a research hypothesis. But if your research is qualitative, there is no need to have a research hypothesis. The best way to identify the theme is based on the literature, based on the research questions you try to answer. So based on the literature, you can find out the themes related to your research question. Okay?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Welcome.
Abdul Rahman, Abdu.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
am I
Dr. Ahmad.
audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Khaled for his valuable lecture about academic writing. Actually, my question is about in my PhD, I'm doing PhD and in law. So if I am writing a new argument, new form, like new agreement in WTO, World Trade Organization. I need to ask Dr. Khaled, what do I need to write in the literature review, as it is something new to write about?
Okay, for the literature review, you need to explain what has been done in the area before. So if you are thinking about, your topic is about new law, I think you might find in the literature quite similar laws, because in a new law, I think you should have some related or indirectly related to this new law. So you need to find out the efforts which has been done by the researchers, this first point. Also, you might explain the efforts by the people who put this law in practice. And this might be the literature in this area.
Dr. Through my literature survey, I found like some agreements in the WTO, World Trade Organization. They mentioned the importance of enacting or formatting new agreements. But shall I mention it as in the literature review?
Yes, I think you need to mention to it, because we can differentiate the literature two parts. There is academic literature, what has been done in the academic research environment, and there is professional literature, all discussion and comments about, in your case, in the law itself. So I think you can include them.
Okay, thank you a lot. I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to get that PPT, because it is so important to me.
Okay, inshallah. I wrote my email in the chatting room. Send me email. I will receive the slides.
Or Professor Khaled,
Okay,
you can send it to me and I will.
Okay, perfect. I will send the slides to Dr. Ahmed and he will forward to all of you.
Okay, that's really appreciated.
Thank you, Abdurrahman. Mu'taz.
Mu'taz, we can't hear you. Your mic is muted.
Yes. Okay.
Yes,
now.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. I am Mu'taz Al-Ubaidi from University of Mosul. Thanks for nice and interested presentation. My question is about in articles about the paragraph of discussion. It should go to details, all details, mean and what I want to say, important and not important discussion. All the points, or should we go to the important points that's related to contribution of the paper?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mu'taz. I think for the discussion, you should focus on the important issues only, like to what extent your findings are in line with the literature, and also the importance of your findings in practice. I think if you make this section too short, like 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, so don't repeat again in this section what has been reported in other sections in the paper.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Abdul Muhi.
Hi, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I hear you.
Okay, great. So I'm an accounting doctoral student at Indian School of Business. And first of all, thank you very much for the enlightening presentation. It has been really great, and it does open up a lot of things for me. The questions I have are a couple. One was in your introduction section, when you talk about how to write the introduction and stuff, you do mention that we need to talk about the main findings, right? But more often than not, we observe that, or at least we are told, being just a PhD student who's starting out, that reviewers or people who see a paper for the first time, they usually end up just reading the introduction. So do we really cover just the main findings, or like, let's say I have currently a paper in which I have a bunch of cross-sectional tests and then a bunch of robustness and sensitivity tests, etc. So what is the best way of, you know, making sure that the reader does get a sense that you have put in the required effort and you do have a result which is really robust, but at the same time not, you know, running over 10 pages in just the introduction section? So is there really a Goldilocks zone in that sense, that, you know, you don't write too much but you still make your point?
Yeah, thank you. So I think for the introduction, the finding should be reported. But here, when I present, I said the key findings. So not all the findings. So your main variable of interest. So some control variables is significant or not significant, doesn't matter, because the control is not the main focus. So just one paragraph is enough for the key findings of your research. And it will be better if you link these key findings with a contribution. So you can say that the paper provides two major contributions. The first contribution will provide empirical evidence that variable X affects variable Y. And you can then explain what's the new here, what's the novel finding here, or you can explain the importance of these key findings. So the point here is that key findings should be mentioned, could be, and it's better to be linked with the contribution and the importance of the research itself.
Okay, that really helps. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Uzma? Uzma?
Me?
Yes.
Okay, I have a question. First of all, thank you so much, sir, Dr. Khaled. I just want to ask, can we cite our previous work in our next paper? Is that possible, or is this justifiable or not?
Okay. Your previous work, if it is relevant to the current paper, you need to cite it. Yes, it should be cited if it is relevant.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Khaled, can we extend the question until 3:15 or no? I know you have another seminar.
Yes, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you. Rida, your mic is off. Rida? رضا؟ معتز أبيادي؟
Sorry, I take my cue.
Go ahead. Your question, please.
Yes, my question again, if I want to publish in Scopus or any journals, what I should, what you advise me to do about the structure of the paper.
Okay, so the best advice I can give to you now is to identify the target journal of your paper. So by reading your paper, look at the list of references. You will find one of the journal you cited a lot. This might be the target of the journal. Then try to read a sample of recent articles published in that journal and check the guidelines to the authors and try to rewrite the paper, your paper again, based on the guidelines given and the structure of the paper presented in this journal.
Okay, shall I give it to proofreading after submitted or before?
Of course, before submission, because you need to be sure that your paper will not be rejected because of the language.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. بروج الصقر. بروج الصقر.
Yes. Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام.
Okay. First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Khaled and Dr. Ahmad. My question is, one of the slides that you have been mentioned through the presentation, you have said the recent published research paper in top rank journals. Would you please just give a way or a method that I could find the top ranked journals in my field, which is the translation one and translation studies?
Okay, thank you. So
Welcome.
the word recent is too general. So you might think about recent is like last 5 years, or recent is the most recent year. For top-ranked journals, I think if you look at Scopus, if you search Google Scopus, open Scopus and search for the translation journals, you will find a list of journals there.
Okay.
That's the best way. And also, if you ask your supervisor or any doctors in your department about which rank you are using in your department, I think they give you the list of journals which is like considered as top ranked in your field.
Okay. And the other question, please, and the last one, the review articles. What do you mean? I don't catch you with the review of the articles. What do you mean by it?
In Arabic, المقالة تحتوي على الدراسات السابقة.
Yeah. So what does it mean? How can I find it?
Okay. In your field, write like any keywords of your topic. And beside this keyword, write review article or systematic literature review.
Okay.
So you'll find the article which survey what has been done in the area and suggest some ideas for future research.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome.
رابح. رابح عبد الناصر.
الو السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
اهلا وسهلا. السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
حالكم لاباس؟ رابح عبد الناصر، طالب دكتوراه من دولة الجزائر. يعني ممكن اطرح سؤال باللغة العربية؟
تفضل.
يعني اشكركم جزيل الشكر الاستاذ الدكتور احمد دكتور خالد. بالنسبة عندي 3 أسئلة. السؤال الأول يعني بالنسبة للمقال يعني ولا المشروع، بالنسبة للتهميش، التهميش في المشروع هذا دائما عندنا فيه إشكال داخل الجامعة، يعني كل دكتور وكيفاه يعطينا يعني كيفية التهميش داخل المشروع. وهذا السؤال الأول. السؤال الثاني بالنسبة لترتيب المراجع داخل كذلك المشروع ولا المقال. وكذلك يعني السؤال الثالث والأخير كيف يمكن الاستدلال ببعض الوقائع من طرف الباحث. يعني أنا كباحث عندي واحد الوقائع يعني ماهيش مدونة، يعني مقيدة في كتب، كيف نستدل بها داخل المشروع والمقال، وكيف يمكن تهميشها داخل المشروع. وشكرا.
بارك الله فيك. السؤال الأول بالنسبة للتهميش، طبعا هنا التهميش على حسب الريجوليشن أو القوانين الخاصة بالجامعة نفسها. يعني كل جامعة بيبقى ليها ستايل لرسالة دكتوراه، مش رأي مشرف. فأحيانا التهميش بيكون داخل الرسالة نفسها أو التهميش في نهاية الرسالة. في بعض الجامعات بيقول لك يفضل عدم التهميش، لأن التهميش يعني لو تهميش معلومات مفيدة الأفضل إنها تكون موجودة في متن البحث. والبعض الآخر بيقول لك لا، التهميش مفيد، لأن لو معلومات غير مفيدة ممكن تحطها في الهامش. فالبعض يقول لك لو مش مفيدة ما تحطهاش أصلا يعني. فهي ديبيت. فأفضل وسيلة أو نصيحتي هنا بتشوف الستايل المتبع في الجامعة، سواء تهميش أو عدم التهميش، سواء التهميش داخل المتن الرسالة أو في نهاية الرسالة، واتبع الستايل المطلوب. من ناحية ترتيب المراجع، في كل العالم ترتب المراجع ترتيبا أبجديا على حسب اسم العائلة، وبعد كده السنة، وهكذا. بالنسبة للسؤال الثالث، لو أنت عندك وقائع معينة أكيد لها أساس، فما أساس هذه الوقائع؟ فالأساس ده هو اللي هيكون المصدر. يعني على سبيل المثال، لو أنا سمعت برنامج تلفزيوني ومن خلال هذا البرنامج توصلت إلى وقائع معينة، يبقى المصدر عندي لهذه الاستدلالات هو البرنامج التلفزيوني. وبالتالي في قائمة المراجع ممكن أقول مين اللي اتكلم في البرنامج التلفزيوني، اسم السبيكر أو المتحدث، وعنوان المحاضرة بتاعته في البرنامج التلفزيوني، واكتب مثلا ده برنامج تلفزيوني في كذا. زي المحاضرة اليوم، لو أخدت منها معلومة مفيدة وحسيت إنك هتفيدك في بحثك وهتضيف لبحثك وحابب تعمل لها سايتيشن، هتكتب حسيني 2020 محاضرة كان عنوانها Tips in Academic Writing، وتقول إن هي أونلاين، محاضرة أونلاين بتاريخ كذا، فهذا يكفي.
وبالنسبة يعني لما يكون يعني إنسان كبير معك في المنطقة، كيف يمكن يعني توثيق المعلومات بتاعه؟
ما هو الإنسان الكبير لازم يكون ليه مصدر للمعلومة نفسها، وإلا يكون اجتهاد شخصي. عشان توثقها يبقى تقول إنك عملت انترفيو مع إنسان كبير في المنطقة. فلو أنت عملت انترفيو هتخش في الجزء الخاص بالمنهجية، وهيدخل داخل الجزء الخاص بالمنهجية. ولكن هو لو قال لك وجهة نظر شخصية لازم ليها أساس علمي، فلازم يكون ليها مصدر، وإلا هيبقى مش بحث علمي. والله أعلم.
ربي يبارك فيك دكتور، مشكور.
الله يكرمك.
شكرا.
شكرا.
بارك الله فيك.
عماد هاشم.
Hi. Many thanks for this workshop. I have two questions. My first question is about writing literature review. You mentioned that I should read first and then I start writing. After I identify the literature structure and when I want to start writing my first session. So should I, for example, I want to write about the legitimacy theory. Then should I search for legitimacy theory, or so how can I start writing about one session? My second question, you mentioned that in each chapter I should identify the key information and gap and importance. So how can we develop our question or hypothesis in each chapter or each session? Thank you.
شكرا لك. بالنسبة for the first question, I think after reading you can structure the points you read in logical order. For example, you are talking about literature review. Should you start by the theory first or the empirical literature? My point here, you can start by the empirical literature to identify the gap and then to identify which theory will help you to fill this gap. And from the theory, you can start by writing a background about different theories in the field, and then talk about your own theory. And after that, justify why you believe this is the right theory to answer or to help you to develop your research hypothesis or to answer your research question. So it should be logical order. For the second question, I mentioned that for each chapter, you need to know the content of each chapter. I didn't say for each chapter you need to develop research gaps and whatever. So what I said exactly, you need to understand the content of each chapter, because if you understand the content of each chapter, it will be easy for you to identify the structure of the chapter itself. So this is what I said for your second question.
So do you suggest that I should write as I read, or?
Write as you read, but like as a notes, and then organize what you wrote as a notes, and then start writing your chapter.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Abdul Qadir.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Alaikum salam. Yes, we can.
Well, this is me, Abdul Qadir from Algeria. I have a question about the title of the thesis. I mean, you said that the best way is to make your title not too long, that is, say, concise and clear, not more than 15 words. Yes?
Yes.
I mean, the question here, shall we omit some words that are part of the title, like the case of first-year engineering students in Algeria? Are there extra words? Because this would affect the length of the title. Thank you.
Yes. Try to delete any extra words which does not add value to the title. So if your major contribution is focusing on Algerian students, it should be in the title. What I mean by deleting unnecessary words, a word like a study of or an empirical study of, these 4 words, if we delete them, it doesn't affect the title. So try as much as you can deleting any necessary words which does not add value to the title.
But sometimes it's difficult. I mean, we are under some difficulties. Sometimes we feel like we are affecting the value of the work itself. Like,
for example, rather than saying evidence from Algerian students, you can say evidence from Algeria.
Okay.
Or studying, or what's your topic?
Yeah, let's say it's about teaching the effect of a given instruction or on students' learning, for example.
Okay.
For example, two variables. Okay.
Factors affecting student learning in Algeria, without mentioning to the word student, because if you are talking about learning, we will understand indirectly that you are talking about the student.
Okay.
So try to delete the word which does not add too much value.
Without specifying even the state, because Algeria is very, you know, it's a large country, and sometimes we are exerting our, let's say, our work on a specific university. Shall we precise that university?
If
in that,
no, I think you don't need to specify a specific university. But in your writing, you will mention that I focus on one university, or you can add the word a case study of. So case study means that you focus on just one case. But the name of the university itself is not needed at all to be mentioned in the title.
Maybe it's better to leave it in the methodology itself. I mean, in the topic.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
عبير الشهري. عبير.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for the useful workshop. My question is about literature review section. My research is across many different fields, around 3 fields. In this case, how is the literature review going to be? This is the first question. The second one is regarding the hypothesis. Is it required to have hypothesis in a quantitative research? Because when I read articles in my field, which is linguistics, some articles and some of the thesis doesn't have any hypothesis.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abir. First of all, if you have 3 different topics, so in the literature review, I think you will start like general background covering the 3 topics. Then you will have subsections, 3 subsections. Each of these subsections will discuss the concept itself. And after that, you will have like a new section covering the 3 different topics together in one place in the literature review. So it's okay to explain them separately first, and then you can merge the 3 concepts or each 2 together and then the 3 together in one go. So this is for the literature. Because I'm from business field, whatever a quantitative research we see in our field in the business, we found research hypothesis. If we don't find research hypothesis, it will be one of the key disadvantage or limitation of this research. We normally don't accept research which is considered as quantitative without research hypothesis. It might be field driven, but personally, if you are using quantitative, if you are using questionnaire, if you have like some relationship between variables, you should explain at least what's the expected relationship between these variables. And if you can explain the relationship between the 2 variables, why not developing a research hypothesis?
Okay, thank you so much.
You are welcome.
The last 2 questions. Abdullahi. Bala. Abdullahi Bala.
Yeah, I'm with you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Alaikum
salam.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. And thank you, Dr. Ahmad, for providing this opportunity. And then thank you, Prof, for giving us these novel ideas about research. Are you with me?
Yes.
You are very welcome. You are very welcome.
Yeah. So my question is, I have tried publishing with some of the Scopus journals, and then in the process of publication with the Scopus journals, I came across some top journals. When I submit to Q1 journals, after the submission, after the review process, they bring back the result. So sometimes when I finish the correction, and then I narrow down to like Q4 journals to submit my paper, which they absolutely take without any correction. So my question here is, I was unable to publish in Q1 journals. So please, is there any tactics that you can give me so that I can publish in Q1 journals other than the normal Q4, Q3 that I normally publish? Thank you very much, Prof.
Thank you. My quick advice to you, if you need to publish in Q1 journals, you have to cite these journals, and your research methodology and your main research contribution should be based on what has been reported in Q1 journals. Secondly, you should be sure that you have incremental contribution above what has been reported in Q1 journals. Thirdly, you need to be sure that you have a strong research motivation in your article, and also you need to be sure that the research methodology you have used is correct and your writing style is correct. If you satisfy these 5 criteria, I think it will be easy for you to get your papers published in Q1 journals.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much for this.
حسيبة بن عبو. حسيبة بن عبو.
Your mic
Hasiba?
is muted.
Yeah, your mic is mute.
حسيبة المايك افتحيه لأنه مقفول، مش سامعينك.
Maha? Okay, we can't hear you now, Hasiba.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
أستاذ فضلك عندي أولا أود أن
حسيبة بعد إذنك لو تبعدي المايك عنك عشان نقدر نسمعك أوضح لو سمحتي.
أولا أود أن أشكركم على هذه المحاضرة الرائعة والقيمة. عندي سؤالين. السؤال الأول، هل نعتمد في الدراسات السابقة على الدراسة التي تعتمد على متغير واحد بالرغم أن دراستي تكون فيها أكثر من متغير؟ وبالنسبة للسؤال الثاني، بالنسبة للمراجع، هناك باحث لديه أكثر من مقال، هل يمكن الاعتماد على المقالات كلها أو نكتفي بمقالين فقط؟ وشكرا.
بارك الله فيك. الإجابة على السؤال الأول، في الدراسات السابقة بيتم الاعتماد على أي دراسات مرتبطة بموضوع البحث. فلو موضوع البحث فيه أكثر من متغير وفي إحدى الدراسات السابقة فيها متغير واحد فقط، لو المكتوب في الدراسة اللي فيها متغير واحد مناسب ويناسب موضوع بحثك لازم تاخديه في الحسبان في الدراسات السابقة. فلا يشترط في الدراسات السابقة إن احنا نعتمد فقط على الدراسات اللي أخذت المتغيرين في الحسبان، لأن ممكن تكون مساهمة البحث الخاصة بك هي أخذ متغيرين في الحسبان، ولكن في الدراسات السابقة ممكن تعرضي إن كل متغير تم على حدة في دراسات مستقلة. النقطة الثانية، لو كان في باحث عنده أكثر من دراسة في نفس المجال وكانت هذه الدراسات بالكامل مرتبطة بموضوع بحثك، الأفضل ناخدها كلها في الحسبان وليس دراسة واحدة منهم فقط.
شكرا أستاذنا.
بارك الله فيك.
آخر سؤال، مها ربيع.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام.
Thanks, Prof. Khaled, for the interesting presentation. I have a question about the research question. If I have a quantitative research, I must have a research question, or the research hypothesis will be enough, or the two were complementary for each other. If I have a question, I have one question will be enough, or multiple questions for multiple hypotheses. Thanks.
سؤال جميل جدا. لو أنا quantitative researcher, should I have a research question? الإجابة yes and no, because we expect that if you are quantitative researcher, you should have research hypothesis. But normally what we found in PhD and the master dissertation, in the introduction and even in your research proposal to submit to register your master or PhD, they ask about the research questions. So it is okay to have research questions and research hypothesis. We can have one major research question and different sub-questions. And from these sub-questions, we might have research hypothesis. For example, we can say that the main research question, does corporate governance affect disclosure? This is the main question. This is the main one. So we can have some research questions like which of these governance mechanisms, like does board of directors characteristics affect disclosure? Does audit committee affect disclosure? Does ownership structure affect disclosure? And then we can have like research hypothesis to reflect these sub-research questions. So my short answer, yes, you can have research questions and research hypothesis for the quantitative research.
Thanks, Prof. Thanks.
Barakallah feek.
Thank you so much, Professor Khaled, for your contribution in ITAR Group, and thank you for your effort and time. I know you have another seminar after 15 minutes. Thank you so much. And also I want to thank all that join the seminar, and I can assure you, inshallah, Professor Khaled will be with us in the future in another seminar, inshallah. Sorry for others that didn't have the opportunity to ask. Inshallah, next time. That's all for today. Inshallah, next week.
If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I will try to answer all your questions.
Great. Thank you, Professor Khaled. And plus, inshallah, next week, the presentation for next week will be about meta-analysis with Dr. Hisham Khalef from Tunisia. I hope all of you enjoy and attend this seminar. Thank you all, and see you soon.